Hi everyone, this is Colleen with Designs of Value Art School, and today I'm going to show you real briefly how I transfer a design. So this is the design we're talking about today. It's one that I sketched up. I want you to be able to see the entire design. It's a rose, wild rose with a rose bud, 3 leaves, and then it's sitting in a vase, and this is the vase that I used in my design. So it is one of the vases that I have around my house. And I took that, and what I did is I put it on my Arches watercolor block. This is 140 pound, 10 by 14 inch Arches watercolor paper. And in order to make sure that I got this perfectly straight, I have my see-through ruler here. Got to find the right edge. There we go. And I measured it side to side. First thing was the table. So I made sure I was lined up with the table, and it was straight edge on this side, straight edge on this side. And then I also measured to make sure from the bottom of the reflection it was straight, and it was, and then from here to the top, and it was straight, flush with the watercolor paper. So you always want to measure, especially a still life. You don't want to have it crooked as you go to paint it. So you always want to make sure you have your see-through ruler and you're able to go ahead and measure everything out onto your paper to make sure that it's nice and straight. So we've got that in there. I taped it where I measured it off so I knew it would be secure. Then I have my graphite paper here. Dark side down, light side up. I like the flat pages like this where they're not folded. If you get the ones that are folded, sometimes you can get a dark mark on your watercolor paper and very difficult to get off, and it may show through with your painting. So you want to be cautious with that. That's why I use this type of transfer paper, and it's soft gray. And I like to use a different colored pencil, whether it be, this one happens to be like a brown, you can use red, you know, whatever colored pencil you may have around. But then you can see where you've been on your tracing and where you still need to go. So then I just go ahead and I transfer or go over the tracing each section at a time. And with this being the brown color, it's showing me exactly where I've been, and I don't miss anything this way. Just going over this little leaf over here. And I've already transferred in the table and kind of where it goes up a little bit from the water reflection in the vase. So we've got that in there. Let's do this leaf right away. I'm one that's always going to do each leaf first. If I'm started with a leaf, I'm going to do the other leaves. And then you don't forget to do one, because I've done that already too. Now I'm not going to put the veins in because we can do that as we paint. Sometimes they're just a little bit softer if you put them in with your brush. Less to erase as well. I always roll over my paintings with an eraser, a kneaded eraser. And what that does then, once I get the transfer down, I pick this up and I roll over it, and it really lightens it just enough that it's not going to show through the watercolor paper as you're painting. So that works out really well. And I always like to put in, especially when you're doing glass, you want to put in all these little lines so you can see what's going on with that glass. And your reflection is just a mirror image of the glass on top. So that's important to have. And so the table will be a little bit darker, and that's what gives you that reflection. So we're going to pick out colors next. The vase is actually, I'm thinking we're going to make it red, but we'll see as to how far when we get to that point, if I decide to continue with that thought, making it red. I may and I may not. I know the flowers, this guy's going to be white with some grays, and it'll be a real good study on painting white flowers for you. This guy will probably be pink because he hasn't, being a bud that hasn't opened up yet, it's probably going to be a little bit darker than the other one anyway. There we go. Now this stem is going behind the glass, so we want to be sure and include that. And this is the shadow of the stem on the table. And I'm putting in the reflection of the bud. And again, reflections are always going to be one shade or two darker than the item itself, simply because the tabletop is going to absorb some of that light, and then in the reflection it does become darker. So when you're painting reflections, you always want to keep that in mind. It's always going to be a little darker than the item itself. Now I'm going to take this off camera and turn it around, and we'll do the flower next. Easier to get at this way and easier for you to see what I'm up to. We're just doing the outside line of designs. All the little detail in there isn't necessary at this point. Like I said, it would just be more to erase anyway. But this is a real basic skill that you want to learn, how to transfer your designs to your paper or whatever surface you're painting on. I did, and it's something you might want to take a look at, just do for YouTube a class on Coors cold press ground, and it's a watercolor ground that you put on a board or a canvas, and you can see me do that. So you can paint on many different things. It does not have to be always paper. So keep an eye out for that one on YouTube. It's always fun to try different items like that. New techniques that are out there, becoming popular. We're getting pretty close here. And when you're doing this, you don't ever want to press real hard. because unfortunately paper is a soft item. You can actually dent the paper just as if it were a piece of wood. That can be dented as well. And I like to go back and double check. It looks like I've covered everything, and that's again the color. Okay, so we've got everything traced on. Now I'm going to remove the tracing or the transfer paper, whatever you want to call it. Set that aside. And before I do that, remove this, I always like to just pick it up and see, did I get everything on there that I wanted to? And it appears that I did. So it looks like we are good. Except for possibly the table didn't come through. So let's go ahead and redo the table. So it's always good to leave at least 2 pieces of tape in place and just lift it up with one. And then tape that one back down. I'm going to grab my ruler, grab my pen. For some reason that didn't come through. So I've got the gray side up, the dark side down towards the paper. We're going to do it inside. And I always like to line this up with the edge of the paper so I know, especially with a tabletop or even a reflection like we're starting with, to make sure that it's straight. So there we go. Straight on that edge. Can't quite see it on this edge, but I know it's straight to the paper. That looks good. Now, let's double check and make sure that came through. Yep, that's better. I can see it. And that's all the darker I really want that to be. Although I did miss the section in the middle there, which is right here. So there we go. So I've got my missing section in there, my tabletop. So we're good there. I can set my tracing aside. And this does not seem to be very dark, which is perfect. I'm glad to see it grabbed it that way. There's a couple spaces, I should say places, that I want to lighten. For example, right here on this leaf, it's pretty dark, so I'm just going to erase that. Just make it so it's barely visible, which is what I want. Same thing on this stem. The stem is actually inside that vase, so it's definitely not going to be too dark. And I'm going to turn this around so we can see it straight up. You can see the drawing alongside of it. So good. We're doing pretty well here. I'm going to erase this section here. It's a little dark. But I don't need to roll with the eraser this time because it just isn't that dark. But that'll be the design that we're going to paint next, is the roses with the vase and the reflections. So we'll talk to you then.